Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I'm an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure to check in the description notes below the video where you will find links to all of my online shenanigans, including how to get my patterns to knit up for yourself, how to join the Watch Barbara Knit Facebook group, how to support me on Patreon, and where to get Watch Barbara Knit merchandise. Today, I'm going to be giving you some tricks, tips, whatever you want to call them, to identify mystery yarn that you might come across or have in your stash. I mean, I know that maybe you all aren't like me, but maybe y'all are like me, that you have plenty of little balls and big balls and all kinds of yarn that has been separated from its label, because when you wound it up, you were like, oh, I'll totally remember what this is. And then it got set aside, or you used it partially, or someone gifted it to you. Regardless, it's a yarn and you no longer know what its provenance is. You don't know what its weight is. You don't know what its fiber content is. You just don't. It's a mystery yarn. So what we're going to do is go through some techniques that you can use to get you closer to having an idea of what this mystery yarn might be. Now, we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to cover yarn weight, as in the thickness of it. We're going to cover how to determine how much yardage you have to work with, and then we're going to address fiber content, with the fiber content being the most comparable to like waving your hands over a crystal ball and trying to figure out what kind of sorcery brought this yarn to you. And it's very rarely going to be particularly accurate, but I can get you in the general vicinity. But first, we are going to do what is its weight? What is its gauge? How thin is it? And from that point, you can determine what kind of needles or what kind of pattern you can use it for. And the primary tool that I recommend for that is testing its wraps per inch, or WPI. I have a wraps per inch tool right here that you're going to see a little bit more up close, and essentially what wraps per inch is literally exactly what it says. It's how many wraps of that yarn you get in an inch when you wrap it, and there are guidelines as to where that falls. Now, I'm going to screen share and show you, if I can pull it up, a chart, but let me just tell you, when you go and look online and search for like a definitive answer of this number of wraps is this weight yarn, you're not going to find a definitive answer. It's kind of all over the place as far as what people define, but this is going to get you in the general vicinity. This is one that I found, and I will link to in the description notes where you can get a copy of this. This is from the Knitting Circle, and this is the wraps per inch cheat sheet that they have out. I figured, hey, it already exists. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I will definitely link to it. And what you can see here is that you have down here at the thickest 6 or less stitches per wraps per inch. This is not stitches per inch. This is wraps per inch is super bulky. Then 7 to 8 is bulky. 9 to 11 is worsted. 12 to 14 is DK. 15 to 18 is sport. 19 to 22 is fingering, and lace is 35 or more. Now you can see there's a fairly substantial jump between 22 and 35. So there's something in here between lace and fingering. And as you can see, the chonkier the yarn, the fewer wraps you're going to get per inch. So the higher the number of wraps, the skinnier your yarn is. So we will jump to me actually demonstrating how to use this tool and giving you an alternative method right now. This is a dedicated wraps per inch tool. As you can see, it is beautifully crafted. And if you are ever at a fiber festival, I believe I got this one at Wisconsin Sheep and Wool, there are frequently artisans who make beautiful handmade wooden tools for fiber crafts. And if you're like me and you want to support said artists, but you're not really in the market for like a $400 like spinning wheel or some like significant purchase, this is actually, they frequently will have these. I think this one was in the $8 to $12 range. They're reasonably priced, and it's a good thing. It's one of those things that you could keep in multiple different knitting bags. I have another one around here someplace, but I wasn't able to find it. It is of a lighter wood color. I think it's maple. But again, these are usually inexpensive, and it's a great way to buy something at a booth that you may not be able to afford, like something more expensive. And they're just fun. And what you have here is they're, cylindrical. And this space right here is 1 inch. So it makes it really easy to figure out the wraps per inch. Now I have pulled out, here's my ball of yarn, and I have pulled out a lot of yarn, because one of the important things is when you do this wraps per inch, you do not want the yarn to be under tension. So you don't want to be like pulling on your yarn ball when you are wrapping. So I go ahead and pull out way more yarn than I think I'm going to need. And then I hold it like with my thumb. Sometimes like this one specifically has this little extra cup, so that gives me a place for me to easily hold it. And then what you want to do is you want to wrap your yarn to fill this space, but you do not pull it. Like you want it like just there. And you see, I just gently pushed it up against the ledge, and then I'm going to wrap it again. And we're just putting these side by side. You don't want to push this down. We're not seeing like how many we can get in here. We're just gently setting them side by side. It's very, see, that one has a little bit of a gap. I'm just going to gently snug it, but not too much. And you don't want to pull it, because that'll, see how the yarn flattens and it changes how the yarn is working. So it is one of the reasons why most people recommend using a round a round tool. You can wrap it around a chopstick. You can wrap it around a big kneading needle. You can wrap it around a pencil. But it's generally considered more accurate to do it around a round type thing than a flat ruler, because it's hard to keep them from flattening out when they are going over a sharp edge. So there we go. I have filled that up. Now, hang on. We're going to pull that around just so I can count it. There we go. So let's count it. Now, I use this yarn because I know what this yarn is, but let's count it anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's 11 wraps I got in there. I think, yes, that's 11. Now, I'm going to do it again. I'm using this. This is what I've got here that I'm using to count, because if I stick my big old finger in there to count, we're going to do it again. But I'm going to use, this is the same exact yarn, but it is a different color, and I want to do that for people with different abilities as far as visual goes, because some people need more contrast and some people need less contrast. So, and it wouldn't hurt to show it again. Again, I have pulled out a whole bunch of yarn, more than I need, holding it down, and then we're going to do this again. 1, 2, oops, I'm way down here. We're going to do this again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and I think I don't want to push, I think 12 is a maybe there. So you can see this time we don't have to count it because I counted it as I wrapped. So with the pink, I got about 11, and with the green, I got about a 12. And again, every single time I do it, it might be a little bit different. If I look at the chart that I have, 11 to 12, 12 falls into DK weight, 11 is worsted weight. So this yarn is in the DK to worsted weight range. I know that this is marked as a DK weight yarn, but as you can see, it got us into the right general vicinity of what yarn weight this might be. Now, I'm going to show you a different way of doing it. If you do not have one of these handy dandy tools, definitely put it on your gift list for this holiday. I'm sure we can find someplace that is selling them. What we're going to do is I've got my favorite pencil that ever existed, the Tyoniger, whatever. I don't know how it's pronounced, but this is the best pencil. And what we're going to do now is the same thing, same idea, and I'm just going to gently, and again, it's a little bit more challenging because we don't have that like marked off space, but I'm just putting them side by side. I'm not putting any tension on it. I'm not squishing it, and I'm not flattening it. But what I'm doing is I'm wrapping more than I think would be visually, and it keeps on creeping towards me because I'm trying to look at it. There we go. See, I think that's more than an inch worth of stitches. And then, holding them in place, I'm going to take my ruler. I have my handy dandy ruler. And I'm going to place this right here. And boop, boop, boop. There we go. Now let's count how many wraps we have in an inch. So we've got 1, 2, hang on. I need to take my glasses off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have, this is showing us 12 wraps per inch using the pencil technique. So that again puts us in the same ballpark of being a DK weight yarn. So that is how you can figure out your WPI, both with, okay, it's focusing on that. Woohoo! Wee! Woohoo! If you have a WPI tool, or if you just have a ruler. Now, I recommend like the pencil or chunky knitting needle over, let me show you trying to actually wrap the ruler itself, right? So first you're going to need way more yarn. I'm pulling it out and trying to get it, and see, it's not as easy to do this, and see how when it goes over that metal edge, I'm wrapping it gently the same way I did the other ones, but when you pull it around that edge, see how it flattens out and they're not touching each other, so I'm gonna have to scooch them over. And in general, it's just not, I find it a lot more fiddly to deal with than to simply wrap a pencil and stick it against this or use the tool. So that is wraps per inch, and that will get you into the right general vicinity of how thick your yarn is. as you saw, it's not an exact science. You got to do it loosely, but you don't want to do it too loosely, and you got to get enough of them in there. But it gets you where you need to go and gives you more information on how that's going to work. Now, wraps per inch is the only demo that I have for you. Like that, when we get to the fiber content, I will explain to you why I'm not demonstrating with fiber content. It's fun. Now, the next thing is, now that we know how thin the yarn is, how much of this yarn do you have? And to figure this out, you have to use a scale and math. Okay? You guys have probably seen my scale before. I have a scale. I got this on Amazon many moons ago. I'll see if I can find one to link to. The secret and the thing that you really want to look for in a scale, and let me get this on, see if it'll do it. Hello, wiki. It's thinking about stuff. Oh, it's mad because I'm holding it. It doesn't want to turn on because, yeah, it's being mad. Oh, there it is. You can see, and the big thing that I would say is you want 2 integers after the decimal point is what's important, because just like a half of, or a 0.05 of a gram when you are dealing with fingering or lace weight yarn can be a really significant difference. So you want to have that. Food scales, like your kitchen scales, do not typically get that precise. So really finding a scale like this that goes to 2 integers, I can't say that word, after the decimal point, is what you want to look for. So what you want to do is, step 1 is take whatever your leftover yarn is and weigh it and write down the number of grams you have. And then you want to get out your yardstick or, tape measure if that's all you got. And you want to measure out 10 yards of your mystery yarn. So what you can do by doing that is simply, put it one end of the yardstick, pull it down, and then you have 1 yard, and then go 2, 3, 4, get to 10, or you can just measure it however you like measuring it. But you want to measure out 10 yards of your yarn, your mystery yarn, and then roll it into a little ball, and then weigh it and see how many grams are in 10 yards. Okay? So from there, if you know how many grams are in 10 yards, you can do the math for how many yards are in the number of grams you have. For example, I just made up some numbers. This in no way reflects any actual yarn in my home. So we've wound off 10 yards, and those 10 yards weigh 5 grams. And we have 95 grams of that yarn to work with. Okay? So 95 grams, and then we're going to multiply it by 10. That is why we use 10 yards, because 10 is easy to multiply by. That gives us 950. You then take that 950 and divide it by the weight of those 10 yards, which we have said is 5 for easy math purposes. Whatever the number you actually got is what you need to use. So 950 divided by 5 is 190 yards. This is the math involved. The variables in this, you have a fixed variable of 10 yards because that's what you're winding off. The variable is going to be how much that 10 yards weighs, and then how much yarn you have. Like if you have multiple skeins, so say you have 322 grams of yarn. You have a couple of whole skeins and a partial skein. In this same context, what we would do is 322, And then we would again multiply that by 10, which gave me 3,220. And then I'm going to divide it by that 5 grams, and that's 644 yards. Now, let's say that it actually, you know what? That's enough math. Never mind. You could go on and on and on. But this is your basic equation, if you will. You take 10 yards, find out how much it weighs, take however much you actually have, multiply it by those 10 yards, and then divide it by the weight you got for 10 yards. And that will get you in the right vicinity of how many yards you have of this yarn. We have covered wraps per inch. We know how thick or thin our mystery yarn is, and we know how much yardage of said mystery yarn that we have. But the final component is fiber content. Now, also you can get into fiber structure and all those kind of things, and yarn structure, and you can mostly look at that and figure it out. But figuring out the fiber content is a lot trickier without having the label. And this is where I'm fairly confident that there are going to be people who are going to say in the comments, just because I know, that having a visual demonstration of some of the things I'm going to talk about would be useful, and is not going to happen. You can search on YouTube and find some of these things, but this involves working with a caustic chemical that I'm actually allergic to, so I'm not going to do that step. And the other part involves playing with fire, which I'm kind of not allowed to do. I'm not saying I'm like totally not allowed, but you know, I'm a bit of a klutz, and I have a tendency, like, I'm not really allowed to use like major power tools and things like that because I kind of make a big mess of things. And right now I'm not going to be setting anything on fire and trying to video it at the same time. Like, if I can focus on what I'm doing with the fire, I'm okay. But it's like the multitasking that I'm really not great with. So when we're looking at determining fiber content, there's actually the 3 B's. There's break, there's bleach, and there's burn. Okay? I'm not demoing bleach or burn, but you can look for those. Now, break is like the basic level, and if all you really need is basic information on your fiber content, it's understanding that different fibers behave differently, and most animal fibers, animal yarns, you can relatively easily break just using your hands. So I'm going to show you, I have this yarn. See, I'm allowed to break stuff. Hang on. So this is a 100% wool yarn. And if I hold it up for you, right? And I'm going to show you, and this is something you can play with on your own. I'm gently holding it, and if I just tug on it, it broke. Now, this also, I believe, is woolen spun, so it has a very weak fiber structure, but wool, most wools, if you put some pressure on them, they're just going to break. Wool blends. This is a silk wool blend. Silk can be pretty hard to break with your hands, but this is a silk wool blend. And again, if I got to pull on it, this time I have to, but I am able to pull it apart. So most of the time, if you have significant animal content, we're talking alpaca, we're talking wool, we're talking things made out of fuzzy critters, you can break it with your hands. So if you can take the yarn and pull on it pretty good, and sometimes, you know, if you're talking about a sock yarn, there might be some nylon content in it, and it's going to make it a little more challenging, but usually it's not over 20%, so you can still break it. Now, plant fibers, on the other hand, are not easy to break. Of course, there are exceptions if you're talking about like a super fine yarn when we get into yarn structures. If you're looking at a really, really fine lace yarn, almost regardless of what it's made out of, it's going to break easy. But a heftier yarn, and when I say hefty, I mean this is just more of a fingering weight yarn. It's a heavier yarn, but this is a 100% mercerized cotton. And look, I put a dent in my finger. I cannot break this with my hands. Cotton, linen, flax. I can't. Oh, man, I hurt my. Look at my finger. Yeah, you can see. I mean, this puppy is not going to break, which also tells you a lot about like why people make things like market bags out of cotton. A cotton, a linen, a flax, a plant fiber is not going to break easily or not break at all when you try to do it by hand. And the same goes for most synthetic fibers. As I said, like in a sock yarn, the nylon is going to make it resist, but usually it will break because nylon has different types of strengths. But something that has a substantial amount of acrylic or polyester or anything like that is going to be challenging to break. So you have those elements. So the break test, again, this is just going to get you into is this made out of or is it made out of plants, or is it made out of plants or plastic, is really you're getting, is this an animal thing or plants or plastic? And those are your two things. So that's the break test. Again, it's not a finesse test. The bleach test depends on the fact that protein dissolves in bleach. And as I said, I'm allergic to this chemical. I'm allergic to bleach. So I'm not messing with it. I mean, I can use it diluted if I need to, but it is not something, it's really the smell of it that causes all kinds of reactions for me. So I'm just going to have to describe it to you. Again, you can Google or look in YouTube and find what happens. What you want to do is you want to snip off a small portion of the yarn you are trying to test and get like a small jar and put some bleach in it. It needs to be fresh bleach, and then use tweezers and drop that yarn into the jar and put a lid on it. I mean, you can also do this in a standing dish, but bleach tends to evaporate very quickly and loses its effectiveness very quickly. So putting it in a jar is going to give you more time with it. Now, some of your wools are going to start to like bubble immediately because bleach is consuming those proteins. And what you want to do is put it in there and watch it for a while and get bored and then go do something else and come back and check on it over the course of time and see what's happening. And why I'm saying that is if nothing initially happens to it, it's might just mean that it's not like 100% wool. If you have something that's like a wool cotton blend, the plant fibers aren't necessarily going to dissolve, but they will become brittle with exposure to bleach, and they will bleach. Like the color of on the yarn will go away. A synthetic fiber is pretty much not going to do much of anything. It will retain most of its shape and it will retain its color. So if you watch it, this is one of the ways that you can find out if you have a blend, because a 100% wool is going to dissolve entirely. Something that is a wool like plant blend or any kind of animal fiber plant blend, the wool will dissolve away, or the animal fiber will dissolve away more quickly than the plant fiber, or the plant fiber doesn't dissolve at all. But you know that like, oh, listen, this is like half of what it used to be. And then like if you try to pick it up and take it out with your tweezers, it'll break because of the brittleness. And like with a sock yarn, if it had nylon in it, all of the wool will go away, but the nylon will remain. So the bleach test allows you to better understand the composition of the yarn and see if it's a natural fiber or a synthetic fiber, because the synthetic fibers aren't going to really do anything in bleach, except for maybe smell bad, I think. Again, I would not sniff this, but I don't go near these sorts of things. Let me check my notes real quick. I want to make sure I got everything. So silk is a protein. it's an animal protein from insects. So the silk should dissolve completely, but it's going to take substantially longer than the wool. And the plant is a maybe as far as it dissolving, but it'll bleach. And then you'll know that it is a plant fiber, and because it will lose its color. So we've got break, we've got bleach, and then we've got burn. And the burn test is fairly exciting. I've seen it done, and there's all different kinds of information that you can get based on how it burns and what color it burns and what it smells like when it burns. And I will link to a fairly extensive another handout that I found, and I will link to it from a different source. Now, this is about fabrics, but the same information can be applied. But let me make sure that I have my information. The first thing is when you burn it, okay, you're going to want to cut off a small thing. You want to work on a fireproof surface, like get out a plate or something. Use tweezers and use a lighter. Don't use a match, use a lighter and hold the tweezers and then light it up. This is what I'm describing to you. I'm not demoing it to you. I'd probably set fire to my iPhone, which is what I use to record things. It's just the way my life is. So the first thing is, what does the burn smell like? Again, don't stick it up your nose, but get a waft. If it is an animal fiber, it's going to smell like hair. It's going to smell like burning hair, which I know we all love that smell, but because that is what it is. It's burning hair. If it is a plant fiber, and this includes rayons, when you burn it, it's going to smell like burning paper. It's going to have that smoky smell that you think of. And if it is a synthetic fiber, it's just going to melt and smell disgusting. It's just going to smell like burning plastic, because that is what it is. So your first layer is, what does it smell like? Now, people can get into like really fine detail with what kind of ashes different kind of fibers make, but I don't have all of that information. But if you set this yarn on fire and you just light the end of it like you're lighting a candle, wool will self-extinguish. You'll get a flame, it'll burn for a little bit, and then it'll go poof, and it will completely self-extinguish, because wool doesn't actually want to burn. I think it has something to do with the lanolin that is on it, but it is actually difficult to burn wool. So if the flame goes out by itself, frequently even before it hits your tweezers, then you probably have a wool or animal fiber. I don't know if alpaca and stuff self-extinguishes. If it is cotton and linen, if it is a plant fiber, you set it on fire and it will stay on fire. That is why candle wicks are made out of cotton frequently. Now it's wax coated cotton to keep it going, but it's going to burn like your Looney Tunes, you know, when they lay down the thing of gunpowder and trying to blow up something. It's going to eventually self-extinguish, but it's going to burn. It wants to burn. It will burn all the way to your tweezers, but once it hits the tweezers, it'll go, which is one of the reasons why we're holding tweezers, not with your fingers. So it flares up very quickly and will burn for a while, and it burns hot. And again, both wool and cotton and other plant fibers and other animal fibers, once it's out, something you can do is actually pinch and see if the burnt part crumbles easily. And that is another indicator that it is a natural fiber, that it crumbles easily. Because if there is a synthetic content to your yarn, or if it's completely synthetic, when you hold the lighter up to the end of your yarn, that yarn is going to melt and ball up and retreat from the flame. It's going to like form a little bead of melted wax. Now, If it's a partial fiber content, like it's partially acrylic, you will get parts of it, like if it's acrylic wool blend, you will get parts of it that flame up and parts of it that melt away. But if you get that kind of curled up meltiness, then you're looking at a acrylic, polyester, or other synthetic, like nylon content. So that is, see, this was the most complicated part. Okay. So there we go. We have break, bleach, burn are our options to determine fiber contents. And again, as I said, this is just getting you in the right vicinity. I cannot give you any technique that you will be able to definitively say this is a 30% wool and 70% whatever. This is just to get you close so you can make some intelligent decisions on what you want to do with this yarn. And one final little thing is, if you've established and you are fairly confident that this is wool and you want to know if it's a superwash wool or a non-superwash wool, the easiest way to deal with that is to see if it will felt. Now, you can knit up a little swatch and like throw it in your washing machine and see what it does, or you can cut off a length and get it wet and then take the two ends and put them to each other and rub them really good and see if they felt into each other. A superwash wool is not going to felt very effectively. And if it felts like crazy, like if you just knit a little square and then wash it in a hot, throw it in with like your jeans or something, and it comes out all felted up, then you know it's not superwash. So, okay. This had a lot of information in it. I hope this has helped some of you that may have these mystery yarns laying around. We went over wraps per inch. We went over figuring out how much yardage you have. And we went over figuring out getting clues to what your fiber content might be. Now, I am not a spinner. I am not a person who makes yarn. So these are just things I have learned. If anything I have said is erroneous, I would love for you to let me know in the comments below, or if anything didn't make a whole lot of sense, please ask questions and let me know if there are any things that you would like me to talk about in the future. I'm always looking for ideas for new videos. So if you like this video, please give it the thumbs up, click that like button. And if you would like to be notified when I upload my next new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.